on the News Channel 5 network. This is OpenLine.
Hello everyone, welcome to OpenLine. Interesting show tonight. We are talking about, once again, Confederate monuments. There's 70 Confederate monuments across the state of Tennessee. There are 37 in and around our county courthouses. So do they represent our history, or do they shine a light on a dark side of our past and represent hatred? Depends on where you are about how you feel about those monuments in many cases. We as a state will be debating what do we do going forward. In the state capitol, there is the bust of Nathan Bedford Forrest. The governor has said he thinks it's appropriate to take that monument down, put it in a museum. So what do we do? Happy to have with us two state lawmakers. We have Representative Brenda Gilmore, a Democrat from Nashville. Thank you for being here.
Thanks for the invitation.
Thank you very much. And Representative Mike Sparks, Republican from Smyrna. Thank you for being here.
Thank you, man.
So I just want to ask each of you, where are you on this? When we start talking about monuments, Confederate monuments, where are you? And I'll start with you, Representative.
Okay, well, again, I appreciate the opportunity to be here and to communicate with your listening audience. I would say that history should not be erased, and so we shouldn't whitewash it and pretend that it didn't happen. But for it to be in a public place, such as the state capitol, that's not the right place for it to be. That we should find a museum or a birthplace for them, or a cemetery, or some place that young people can continue to learn about the history and what it represents. But we shouldn't use public resources, public money, and put it in a public place.
Representative Sparks, what are your thoughts?
Well, you know, the money's already been spent on these monuments and these busts, so it's not a fiscal cost to the taxpayers. There will be a fiscal cost if we go to remove them, though. If we go to try to rewrite history and censor history. I'm reminded what George Orwell said, Ben. He said the most effective way to destroy people is to deny and obliterate their own understanding of their history. I want to remember history. I know Forrest, Nathan Bedford Forrest, is a very controversial subject, as I well know this year. My whole thought process this year is to say, look back at history. Tennessee's rich history. The first black lawmaker come from my district, Samson Keeble. He was a Republican and a Confederate soldier. It's not talked about. Nathan Bedford Forrest, yes, he had the connection with the Klan, but later in his life, he became a Christian and he advocated for African Americans in Memphis. It's all historical, it's all documented. Just like Gettysburg Address, Nathan Bedford Forrest ended up advocating for African Americans. I say, when we look at folks that make mistakes in their life, we've got prisons full of young men, black and white, that make mistakes, and we don't need to hold that against them for the rest of their life. People do change their ways.
But do we need to erect a monument to them if they made a mistake?
Yeah.
But do we penalize them for the rest of their life, though?
Yeah, I would have to disagree with the representative on that. I think that there's a way to recognize people's contribution and what they did without revering them, or without celebrating them, and without honoring them. And he is in a very honored place when he's in the state capitol. We have to pass by him every single time we go in that chamber to represent all of Tennesseans, both African Americans, Latinos, whites, every kind of nationality. And Nathan Bedford Forrest didn't only just have a connection with the KKK, he was the first Grand Wizard. And from what we read about history, he was also very, very cruel. Even when the African American Union soldiers had given up, he still killed those soldiers. So he shouldn't be in a place of honor. So I really would have to disagree with Representative Sparks on that. We don't have to celebrate him. I'm not saying erase history. I'm just saying he shouldn't be in a place of honor.
Well, we were talking off there. I can understand maybe moving the bus somewhere so folks don't have to walk by them if they don't want to.
Well, like a museum, I guess.
Well, it's absolute. It's a teaching
tool. What do you replace it with, though, Ben? You know,
I don't know.
Now, one thing, let's go back to Forrest. I was born and raised in Rutherford County. Was a county commissioner there in Rutherford County at our courthouse, and I'd always heard about the raid that he led at the courthouse and freed, I think it's roughly 100 men who were going to be executed. Citizens, just Joe Q citizens that were going to be executed. He freed those men. He had 56 African Americans who rode with him. 56 men rode with him that could have shot him in the back anytime they wanted to. So he couldn't have been that bad. He denounced the Klan later. He denounced it. Fort Pillow, there was a congressional hearing with that, and even I think it was Sherman that even, in other words, kind of exonerated him with Fort Pillow. Forrest, it's an interesting piece of history.
And he's a fascinating figure, but let's talk even bigger, more broadly. I mean, Confederate war heroes, they are part of our history. Should we have monuments up for them when they actually were fighting against the government? I guess there's some people that have concerns about that. So we can debate, each individual, but what about the broader issue?
I think people gloss over that figure, that these were generals. Sure, they had great skills. They could have been commended for their skills, but these were gentlemen that were trying to tear America down. I mean, in today's terms, it would be treason. And while the other soldiers on the other side was trying to bring American and build it up. And so I don't think that we can gloss over those facts. We have streets, we have schools, we have monuments in 31 states in the United States. I am not saying topple them down and burst them and tear them down. I'm just saying remove them from public places and put them in a place that they can be used as a learning tool, such as a museum or someplace that's not a public place.
Yeah. The irony is ISIS is doing this over in the Middle East. I mean, they're doing that in the Middle East, and it's kind of a strange parallel that we're seeing this movement that I'm saying has been created. This movement, because this whole session, the Black Caucus, with all due respect, this wasn't even mentioned this whole session. I never heard anything about it, and all of a sudden now we hear about it. So
well, I think it's
if it wasn't an issue in January, February, March, or April, or May, all of a sudden it's an issue now.
Well, I think it's always been an issue for years, probably for the last 50 years.
I don't think anybody brought up a piece of legislation.
I think what is brought to the surface is what has happened in Virginia, when we saw Nazi, neo-Nazi, KKK people marching down the street saying that Jews will not replace us. I think all of this has brought it to the surface. And any time that there's a wrong or something that's unjust, there's always an appropriate time to talk about it. There's never a time that there's not appropriate for us to talk about it. And I think one of the other things too, Ben, that also gets glossed over is most of these statues were not built after the Civil War. Most of them were built during the 60s, in the latter part of the 19th century and the early part of the 20th century, when we saw many, many black people being lynched. So it really came to represent a symbol of white supremacy. And so do we want those monuments to represent that? I would say no, that's not what America's about. We should be about love and about bringing people together.
I'm with you. I like the quote that Dr. King had said when he said, "Darkness cannot drive out darkness, only light can drive out darkness. Hate cannot drive out hate, only love can do that." And that's where forgiveness comes in.
Of course we can forgive them, we just don't have to celebrate them.
Now, well, let me ask this. Now, obviously we heard President Trump and others, they say, okay, where does it stop? So he said, okay, we take down these monuments with the Confederate war heroes, then do we go to Jefferson and Washington? Address that. I mean, what do you think there?
I think those gentlemen also had slaves, and I'm not condoning it because they had slaves, but they were for trying to keep America together and trying to build America up. The Confederate generals that we have bust all over the United States, again in 31 states, they were the ones who were trying to tear America down. I mean, we're talking about patriotism. I love the flag and I love America, and I want to see it be strong and not to use a race as a divisive tool. And I believe that that's what those generals do.
I think this is just being stirred up. I think you got paid protesters, and I think this is all orchestrated, because it wasn't an issue 2 or 3 months ago. It was not an issue this legislative session.
So what happened down in Virginia? Are those paid people?
I think some of them are, yes ma'am, I do. Let Virginia take care of Virginia, let Tennessee take care of Tennessee.
Well, we're in America. You cannot separate what happened in Virginia.
Yeah, but what we can't do is have a knee-jerk reaction to something that happens.
I think what we have to do is to make sure that the same thing that happened in Virginia does not happen in Tennessee. And the way that we do that is to respect our races. And
I think Tennessee historically has, I mean, we have a great relationship in the caucus. Ben, I don't know if you know, Representative Gilmore had asked me to stand with the Black Caucus last year. Remember?
I do. I do.
Why did you ask me to stand with
that? That was a case when some babies in Murfreesboro were being handcuffed.
Right,
I thought it was wrong.
Right.
And as the chairperson of the Tennessee Black Caucus, because he represents a portion of Murfreesboro, Sumner County, and it happened down there, I asked him to stand with us. At the same time, he has not shared with you that he did something that was, we thought, a little dishonest.
Yeah.
And I got on him about that. It was a piece of legislation. It was a piece of legislation. He wanted to honor somebody.
Sanford Keeble, the first black lawmaker.
Through a resolution that had written about KKK, and we said no, we don't want to be a part of that.
All right, we talk about history. It's all about interpretation.
And that is true. It is all about interpretation. It's very difficult.
And this is what he did. This is what he did.
Tennessee's
he started off talking about the first African American representative in the beginning,
who was Republican,
and he buried in the middle.
No, I did not. No.
You
can't. We can work all this out.
KKK person.
No. And so, anyway, it's the resolution about Tennessee's rich history.
Right.
And I'm trying to recognize the good, the bad, the ugly before we get to a situation like Virginia.
And even
let me ask
his caucus said that what he did was wrong.
No, they didn't.
I've
got 25 co-sponsors.
But we don't want to get too far into that. I want to focus more.
Why did you stand on the floor and apologize?
I apologize if your feelings were hurt.
I want to focus more on this, but I appreciate that you all are working through this. This is good, and I want you all to get on the same page here. That's a positive thing. But do you see, I guess, Representative Sparks, I mean, you're saying this is a new thing, but do you see that some of these monuments could cause pain, or do you think that's not legitimate?
I turned 50 this year, and I've never heard anybody ever complain about them.
Oh yes, maybe it's because you had not been in the right places. We have freedom riders in Tennessee that protested.
I
don't know where you got that.
Andrew Young, who was with Dr. King when he was assassinated. He was a former mayor of Atlanta, congressman, and UN ambassador. He's saying to leave the monuments alone. This was on NPR. I heard it this morning.
Well, he can't speak for all black folks.
No, but he was with Dr. King when he was assassinated.
Absolutely.
You can't get no bigger civil rights than this guy right here.
That's right.
But
he's saying leave it alone.
There are some civil rights leaders in Tennessee, in Nashville. In fact, some of them sent me an email and said, good luck. You know, we tried to do that when we were young, and we tried to get that bus removed, even the one that we see in other parts of Tennessee, and we were not successful. And they said,
it's a tough one. But guess what? We have a ton of calls, so we're going to take
down
a break.
Andrew Jackson.
No.
I mean, what's the difference?
No, I'm not.
The Indians would probably argue that he needs to come down if force coming down.
So the difference would be one fought against the country, one fought to build the country up. But now, all right, we're going to take a break. All right, we're going to take a break, and then we're going to take some calls.
Okay,
That's going to be interesting. Okay, let's take a break. We'll be back right after this.